Hey everybody, this is Eric Enge. I'm the CEO of Stone Temple Consulting. You have reached a digital marketing answer show along with my guest host today, Dustin Stout. How are you, Dustin?
I am fantastic, Eric. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. My youngest son graduated high school actually on Friday.
Awesome.
Oops, I lost my pet here. And because it's kind of funny, it's a great weekend, but my wife keeps telling me that I've kind of regressed somehow, and it's made me a lot more childish in terms of my behavior patterns. I just have no idea what she's talking about.
Yeah, well, you know women, they're unpredictable.
Yes, they are. So there we go. Maybe that will help better right there. How about that? Okay, so I guess I'll eventually get over it. Actually, truth be told, it's easy for me to deal with. Love to see them progress and get older, and they're all three of my kids doing great. So there you go. So all right, let's dive in. I mean, the theme of this is I don't need no stinking images. So tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, you may or may not be wrong. I won't say that you're absolutely wrong because every brand is different, everybody's story is different, and everybody's goals are different. But I will say this, in this current state of the internet and the social media world in particular, images are the hottest thing in content marketing right now. Why are they? Well, it's very, very simple. If you look at the history of anything, the history of automobiles, for instance, I just read a blog on Medium from an I think she was the ex-director of design at Google. So she did this fantastic article about how basically the internet is becoming a more and more visual place, and she used the example of cars, automobiles. So when you first had your first automobiles, you look at the Model T Ford, the original one, it wasn't pretty. I mean, it was elegant in its own way, it was revolutionary, but from a design standpoint, it was not really about the design, it was about the function. They were trying so hard to get that function down that that design was an afterthought. And so, they worked on the automobile, and over the years it progressed and technology got better. We got better with understanding the technology and using the technology, and the functioning became better. So what happened next? The only real differentiator then had to be design, style. So the design started to evolve, and I think that's very parallel to where the internet is today. In the early days of the internet, everything was hideous. Why? Because we're just trying to figure out how to use it, how to make it function for us. But we're at a point now where function is there. Putting up a website takes 5 minutes. If you're installing WordPress and you have a hosting, you can even start up a new blog in less than 2 minutes on Blogger or WordPress.com. The function is there, and it's accessible to everyone. Now the differentiator is, how do we make it more attractive, more beautiful? And that's where visuals come in. And I think the social media world is just, it's just shown that it's rapidly evolving in the visual space. That's why Pinterest got so big so quickly. That's why Google Plus outshines the other social media platforms, because they pay specific attention to images and photographs and the quality of them. So visuals are very much in, and they're very much a distinguishing factor that will either allow you to stand out from the crowd or get surpassed by your competition.
Yeah, it's really true. And before I add to that, I just want to mention, for those of you who are wondering why Mark Traphagen isn't here today, it's not because he's been tossed from the show, as I joked in the initial event description. He has been without his wife for almost 2 weeks while she's been journeying around Europe, and she's returning today, and he's picking her up. And
That's just so sweet.
yes, and I reluctantly agreed that that was a higher priority, and and he's off doing that. So, but thrilled to have you with us today, Dustin. And it's kind of funny because, as you know, when you were in your prior working situation, I tried several times to get you on the show, and I could never do it. So it's great to be able to do this with you. But one of the things I think that research has shown is that there's different kinds of learning and issues when it relates to websites. One is this notion of visual learning and the rate at which people can absorb information from a picture or an image being much greater than they can when they have to read something, which I believe they call cognitive learning. And then there's yet another layer when you introduce the need for them to do something with, involving moving the screen, or in this case, going below the fold, and you have to get the little motor action involved here. And all of those things are different levels of making a web page much more easily digested. So I think the evidence is in that it's just a fundamental difference when it comes to how quickly someone can absorb what it is you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, and a fun fact for all the viewing audience, the brain actually processes visuals, images, 60,000 times faster than text. Not twice as fast, not 10 times as fast, 60,000 times faster. Our brain can interpret an image rather than read a piece of text. And that alone is just a mind-blowing statistic.
I still haven't processed that statement. Can you put it into a visual for me?
Let me visualize it real quick.
So
take me a minute.
There's a sheet of paper and write it. No, that doesn't quite work, right? But yeah, that's amazing that it's that much faster. And then you put that in the context of all this data we've seen that says that if people don't see what they want on a web page within X seconds, they're out of here. And those, how many seconds people give varies, but it's always a very small number. And so it's really quite compelling. I forget, it was Google, and I think Google and Bing actually collaborated on some test at some point where they introduced some delays into their search results, like 100 millisecond delay in the search result, and they noticed a significant deprecation in the volume of searches that people were doing, and it was that small a difference made a big what was a big deal. So it's amazing that it's so impactful.
Yeah, and another fun statistic about people abandoning pages. The studies have been done recently talking about the average adult attention span. What would you think the average adult attention span is?
1.2 seconds.
1.2 seconds. Well, you're It's funny. I was a teacher for a long time, teaching teenagers, and the rule of thumb was always you have 1 second, or maybe it was 1 minute for every year of age. So for 15-year-olds, you might be able to get them for 15 minutes if you're really good. But studies have shown that currently the average adult attention span is 2.8 to 8 seconds.
Yeah. Well, so that's amazing, and I deliberately picked a very small number. So.
But you weren't too far off.
Yeah, a little bit below the low end of the range, but right. I mean, you flip to that web page, and you're going to make that decision very quickly. The interesting stat that or fact that I'll share back with you, which is that there's a study published actually on the Stone Temple site that was done by Ashutosh Garg at Bloomreach, and what this study showed is on an e-commerce page, when there's a high commercial intent query, the bounce rate goes up, even though the page is a perfect match for the query. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of this study was you don't want to just look at a single stat, because at the same time, the conversion rate went up.
That's
Right?
interesting.
It is interesting, but it illustrates the fact that people in that they make the decision very quickly. It's like they get in there, it's like, and if they're like struggling a little bit, bam, out of here. So it's pretty interesting stuff. So I think it's safe to say that maybe I do need some stinking images after all.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And based on my experience with Dustin.tv and with some other blogs that I've been studying, some of the big blogs out there like Social Media Examiner, Washington Post, Mashable, Verge. I study kind of these big blogs, and with Social Media Examiner, I know that they seem to make it a point to add a visual every couple of paragraphs or every few paragraphs or so, and that's very telling. I mean, I'm sure they've done studies on this. They're big enough and large enough where they can do that kind of research, and I've noticed with my own posts, the time on site is much higher when there are more visuals on the page, just from my own statistics. So that's an interesting study to figure out for your own website, your own blog. Which ones keep people on the site longer and what keeps people more engaged for longer, but also the conversion aspect as well. And I think I need to go back and do a little more research on the conversion aspect of that too, because that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I think of course, it's not a matter of slapping up any image, right? So you have to
Right.
Do some intelligent things with it, and if your goal is to get a conversion, then what can you do with the image that increases your chances of getting a conversion? Now, I mean, I've gone through my own journey, and I don't come from a media background. I come from first hardware design and then software developer background, and have evolved into a business and marketing type guy. But what's come with that is that it took me a little while, or really a long while, to fully appreciate the value of images and begin to use those more. And you mentioned it, and I saw Mark Traphagen wrote something about this recently, about how he tries to make sure that no page, no screen can be loaded without at least one image on it somewhere in all of his posts, and so that's good. I'm adding some images, but like what images?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that you want to take into consideration is your audience, right? I mean, we want to think first about our audience, and secondly about the content that we're delivering to them. Now, you don't just want to slap up any old image that has nothing to do with the content that you're actually serving them. You want to make your images relevant, just like anything. You don't want to just bait them in with something pretty, because when it has nothing to do with what you're serving them, what's the purpose of the image?
Yep.
So one thing you can do is really just take some time to understand what it is you're serving them. How is it what message are you trying to convey? And then what sort of imagery would align with that message? A great example would probably be if you're I mean, this is an easy example, but if you're a blog talking about dog grooming, you're obviously not going to share a cat photo along with that image.
Unless it's in the dog's mouth, or
unless it's in the dog's mouth, right? Or you're saying something against cats. But you want to serve something that's relevant.
Cats, people, just so you know, it was just a joke.
Just a joke. We love cats, especially here on Google Plus.
We have the STC cats, and they just scratched my right leg here and told me to stop that, so I had to apologize.
So it's about relevance. Now, oftentimes you may not be able to find an image, say on an image that relates to SEO. That's not necessarily a visual concept, is it?
No.
But you can use something that relates to it in some way. So SEO is related to technical things, a laptop, a computer, something that looks authentic and not stock photo-y, and then throw some text over top of it to give it more context. I do that with actually every blog post now. I'll throw an image and throw some text over top of it to help give the image context. So that's just one way that you can relate the imagery to the content in order to give that the viewer, the reader, or the user a way to relate visually to the content that they're being served.
Yeah, so David Graham actually has a question about this. So how rapidly are words on images processed, and what does that do, that combination? Is a pretty interesting thing to think about.
I think it's probably the same, however long it takes you to process the words. Because the study that was done was really just on the processing of images, and I don't think having an image behind it would enhance or dilute, or maybe it would. I don't know. Not sure.
Yeah, but a lot of times you have these images with just a few words on it. You know what I'm saying? So I wonder if that makes it a little different, right? Because there's only a few words. Like 3 words you have to process along with some visual reinforcement.
Right.
Don't really know, but here, I'll show you an example of, I'm going to throw up an image that we created. This might show a little small on the screen, so let me, but hopefully people will get the idea. So here's an image we created about the indirect value of guest posting. You have a person doing guest posting, and they do 5 different guest posts, and there's all these other audiences, and then you have these authority people over on the right. It's a little bit confusing without the explanation. So this image might be failing because it's too complex, but the idea was to express a technical concept about how sharing guest posts might cause influencers, these folks over on the right, to see you and get your name in front of them multiple times, and eventually they decide to check out your blog and become a loyal fan. So that was an attempt to express a complex technical concept and add some color and make it more interesting.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes it more a little bit easier to understand. I didn't read the article, but just those visuals of the arrows pointing towards one point, or going in different directions, that helps comprehension significantly. Things like infographics are there for a reason, and they do well for a reason. And it's not always about the instantaneous comprehension, but more or less the added comprehension that visuals add in.
Yeah, so here's a different one. It's much simpler about how a press release can get you in front of media, and then they might tweet it or share it on Facebook or Google Plus or whatever, and gets in front of their audience, and that might drive some links to your site. So that's a simpler image, same idea. Just trying. So and put them up just because you were talking about SEO might not seem like a visual thing, and maybe you'd argue that those are really more about content marketing, but those things are obviously closely related. You can still make something more approachable than that big blob of text.
Right, exactly, and it always helps. That yours was a perfect example, because it's not just it's visually showing relationships from one thing to another and how it operates. The functions are being shown visually to help people comprehend better, and you can never go wrong with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so let me ask another question. I saw a post from somebody, it might have been you, JPEGs versus PNGs versus other file formats. What are your
Uh,
thoughts?
well, that's it's more a matter of technicality. Depending on the image, sometimes a PNG can be lower file size, but that is dependent on the image. Sometimes you save a JPEG and it'll be a smaller file size than a PNG. GIFs are the same. GIFs or GIFs, depending on how you want to pronounce it. GIF is the correct pronunciation. So a GIF is usually a lower file size, but the quality is compromised quite a bit. So depending on how obsessed you are with the quality of the imagery and the file size, because if you're uploading it to a website, file size is an issue because you don't want the file to be too big because it takes too long to load. It downgrades the user experience, and if it's taking too long to load, people are going to bail. So it's always best to try whichever one allows you to maintain the level of quality that you want, while also keeping the file size as small as possible. And I just shared a link yesterday to a really great app online. If you do have images, you can throw your images through this web app. It's called compressor.io. And it basically shrinks down your images as small as it can with minimal, almost unnoticeable image quality loss. And there's tons of apps out there that do that. This one just happens to be a web app that does a pretty good job at it.
Right. And I think I saw that the argument was that PNGs, while people tend to think of them as being higher resolution, it's not necessarily the case.
Not necessarily, no. The main quality of a PNG that you would choose it over a JPEG, aside from the file size, is that you're able to do transparency. So if you had an image that was a square, but you had, say, the Dustin.tv logo, and you only wanted the white part to show, and you wanted nothing else to show, you can do transparent images with PNG. So you can have transparency active in the PNG. Whereas with JPEGs, it's always a flat image. If there's transparency when you save it, then it saves as white or black.
Right. So you can do layers too, right, with PNGs. Is that right?
Well, I mean,
doesn't matter.
It always displays flat.
Yeah.
So if it is a PNG, it flattens, but you can incorporate that transparency into it. So if you have holes or open white space, as opposed to filling it with a color, it would be transparent, invisible.
Well, and that's what we're doing here with our overlays on the DMA. Well, for me, that's just my background where it says DMA show and all that. And but this Eric Enge, the digital marketing answer show, you can look over at the Stone Temple. You can actually see it.
Yeah, so these overlays that we're using right now, even mine right here, right there, you can see there's transparency. You can see behind it. If I were to use a JPEG, this color would flatten out. You wouldn't be able to see behind it. In fact, this whole screen would be blanked out because if it was a JPEG, there's no transparency allowed in that sort of format. It would just be flat color. But because it's a PNG, you can see behind it. I mean, even this one here, you can tell it's a PNG because you can sort of see me back here. There's transparency.
Except we can't see your shirt because it's the same color as your shirt.
My shirt, because it's invisible. It's hidden.
There you go. Yes, and that was the hidden Dustin trick that we did the other day when you were in an all-red room with that very same shirt.
My camouflage.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about coming up with, and brainstorming or whatever it takes to come up with the right images for a given post. How do you go about doing that, Dustin?
Well, for me, it's a process of narrowing down the message. I'm super adamant about simplicity. I think in any form of communication, you have to give people one thing to take away or one thing to focus on, one thing to latch on to. Even if you're doing a complex tutorial, that involves 20 plus steps. You have to narrow down your idea to one concept. And we do this with titles on blog posts. So it's always easy to start with the title. So you have a title. Let's say you're writing a blog post called "The Anatomy of a Perfect Google Plus Post." So your image.
Someone should write that post, Dustin.
Someone should. I mean, it'd be a really good article, I think.
Yeah, he did. He did. Just so you know.
I did write that article.
Great article.
So the image doesn't have to convey too much. It just has to get the idea of maybe anatomy or dissecting something. So the one that I used, I'll just show this real quick. The one that I used was, I found an image of a camera that had been disassembled, and I don't know if you can you see that?
Oh, sorry, I was off getting your article. So, yes.
Okay, so in the background you can kind of see a blurred out image of a camera that's been disassembled and taken apart, and so you can see this camera's anatomy all over the place. And that's kind of what I gravitated towards, because I was deconstructing something and showing all its parts, basically. So that worked real well for me. I just put a red gloss over it and added my logo to the middle for this featured image on the blog post. Really simple concept. I mean, there's really not a science to it that I can give, because really you just have to find one thing to latch onto and find an image that communicates that one thing. One way that I do it is I have a series of sites that I visit. I actually wrote a blog post about this too. The best places to find free images online. So dustin.tv/find free images. I go through those websites with maybe a couple ideas of an image that I'm looking for, and I just look for free images that align with it. And once I find an image, I just take it, and since I'm a designer, I take it into Photoshop and make it pretty. But it's really, you just have to find some sources for inspiration for yourself, narrow it down to a concept, and find something that relates to that concept.
Yeah, and it is going to require some experimentation, I think, given whatever it is you do, and whatever area you're good at being creative at, because it isn't just as simple as having color or being visual. There's certain images that work really well. I think it usually seems to have something to do with evoking some level of emotion or reaction from the person looking at it, even if it's just an intense curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's truly an art to that part of it.
Yeah, and you brought up something really important, and that's that visuals evoke emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to hook your audience, you really need to find a way to emotionally grab them, whether it is that curiosity or whether it is excitement. I tend to use red a lot because it's psychologically proven that red, the color red, communicates excitement. It actually raises your heart rate when you see it, and it just communicates active, exciting. So and it's also my favorite color. So I tend to use a lot of red.
How about orange?
Orange is great too. Orange is also an exciting color. It's associated with youthfulness, with ambition. Appropriate for you, I think, Eric. Goes well with your green.
You're suggesting I'm ambitious, really?
I'm suggesting it.
There we go.
And certainly the squid adds to your youthfulness that orange also communicates.
Yes, see? Just building consistent themes. So we have a question.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so there is a bit of psychology, in putting together these images. There's a lot that can be said, but really what you want to do is tap into what you want your audience to feel. What is it you want to pull out of them? What do you want to move them towards? Ask those questions. What are we trying to get our audience to do, see, feel, and think? And use imagery to as basically steroids.
Right.
Images are steroids to making those things happen.
All right, I'm going to pull in a few questions from the audience here. So Susan Finch is asking us to please talk about the importance of adding long descriptions to images that are posted. That's one of the steps a lot of people miss on Google+. And it looks like from context that she's talking about in the case of a Google+ post.
Okay. Yeah, so so those of us who have been around Google+ and are sort of the savvy social media user, we don't like image dumps, especially here on Google+. Maybe on Pinterest that stuff flies. You can just post an image, not have to say anything about it. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to have an opinion. You can just post a photo. But here on Google+, we like engagement. We like talking. We want to hear what your thoughts are. And we're very sensitive to spamming. So on Google+ in particular, if you just post an image without giving any thoughts whatsoever, or giving a shallow, hollow, thoughtless few words about it, then people are going to get turned off really easily. You want to give your thoughts. You want to say something. Don't just post a pretty picture. I talked to one client about this, and Eric, I'll use you as an example. Let's say you were sitting at a cafe, and let's see if I could find a good example here. Let's say you're just sitting at a cafe, and oh gosh, of course I don't have any visuals around me. Okay, here's a good one. So you're sitting at a cafe, Eric, and you're just having your coffee, reading your news, and I walk up to you, not saying a word. I just walk up to you and go,
"Ah, you have a young baby."
And then I just hand it to you, and I walk away. What would you think in your mind about me? You would think, that guy's really weird. He just walked up, flashed something in my face, and didn't say anything, didn't give me any context, just walked away. That guy's really weird. I'm not ever talking or going near him again. I'm going to try to avoid him. In fact, I probably will never come back to this cafe again in fear that he might be here.
Right.
So,
and
you
hopefully
want to be
he
a
won't
real
mind
person.
if I shred his book, because I don't know what I'm doing with this book about his baby's first year.
Right. So you give some context to people. You write something. Give your thoughts. Tell us why you're sharing this. Be a real person. And I think that's part of the whole evolutionary process of online too. It's not so much about the function anymore. We're evolving to a point where the online world is becoming a lot more relational, a lot more like real life relationships. And so, just plastering an image and just hoping people engage with it just doesn't fly with the savvy social user.
Well, right. I mean, we're looking for more of a connection, right? I mean,
Right.
Sure, the picture might evoke some emotions. I mean, hey, baby's first year, you would think that would evoke some emotion, but then you added the part about, leaving it with me and walking away. And, of course, there was also the shoving it in my face to begin with, which wasn't good either. It's
Right. And that's what non-savvy marketers do. They take things, they shove it in your face, and expect you to respond.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't work. It doesn't. And I can go even further into that. That example was actually I used it when talking about how one of the biggest problems I see online is people stealing images and not giving credit for those images. Something again that can fly on Pinterest because you're usually sharing an image with a link to your original post. But imagine I'm walking down the street and I see a painter who's got his beautiful works of art displayed on the sidewalk, selling them, because that's how he makes his living. Imagine I just grabbed one of those photos, walked away, didn't say anything, just didn't acknowledge him, just grabbed it, started walking down the street because I liked it, and I wanted to share it with people. So I walked into the cafe with that painting, shoved it in your face, didn't say anything, just handed it to you, and walked away. So you're left there going, okay, did you make this painting? Like, why are you handing me this painting? You're very awkward. I don't know what I'm doing with this painting now. So number one, you just screwed the painter because he gets no credit for his work, like he should. And I look awkward. I look like a big weirdo because I just shoved it in your face, and you're left confused. You're dazed and confused, just coffee and a painting and no idea what to do with it.
Yeah, you seem to have that as an objective, by the way, in today's show, is to find ways to portray yourself as a weirdo. So maybe we'll shift from getting you in that light. And
well, I'd rather use myself as a weirdo example than out all the spammers out there violating these issues.
Yeah, well, sadly, there's a lot of that. Just briefly, I'm going to throw this up since George Lutz kindly points out some of the other associations with Orange. Thank you, George. I appreciate that. But with this idea of image theft, this is really a big deal online. So there's been this culture that a lot of people have that because it's published online, they can just grab it and use it, and it's really unfortunate because it's actually illegal. These things, they're copyrighted. They belong to someone. They did something to create it,
Right.
And you can't just go take it and reuse it somewhere. So your
Right.
example of the artist and the paintings feels more extreme to people, but from a
it's not.
legal perspective, it's no different. What you talked about is taking the guy's painting versus taking somebody's image that they've posted online and reusing it without, permission, attribution, and all that.
Right, and it's because of the nature of digital. When we make a copy of an image, when we copy it and save it to our desktop, technically we're not taking anything away from that artist, are we? We're just copying it. He doesn't lose that image. It stays right where it was, right where we found it. We just take a copy of it, and we don't think of the weight of that, or most people don't consider when they upload that image and share it with their audience, whether or not their audience is saying, "Oh, they must have taken that photo," or "Oh, they must have created that graphic." We just assume people know we didn't do it when that's not the case. So there is copyright issues. I've written an extensive post about the legality of sharing images online. Peg Fitzpatrick has written a great piece on that. Sarah Hawkins has written extensively about that. That's kind of her specialty, and I reference all those in my legal image sharing post. But we don't consider that. Most of us who aren't accustomed to it yet. But yes, there is a legal issue when you take someone else's work without their permission, without giving them credit, and share it anywhere online.
And the thing that people don't realize too is that Creative Commons license almost always requires attribution, even though you can use the image. And for that matter, even when you go and buy a photo from a stock photo site, the overwhelming majority of the time, if you dig into their licenses, you're actually supposed to provide attribution as well. You don't actually own the photo after you buy it from a stock photo site. You're buying a license to use it in certain limited ways. Really important for you to learn to understand these things because there is going to be more legal action over these things in the coming years.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's another reason why I created my list of free image sites, because these sites that I listed have absolutely no copyright attached. You can use them without attribution. You can build upon them. You can edit them, modify them. They're completely free images to use and share. That's why I actively promote those sites, because they're an invaluable resource, and it makes sure that you're being a good internet citizen.
Yes, indeed. So that's a great thing. I got a comment here, a question from Scott Scowcroft. How damaging is the use of stock photos for posts and in blogs? So the implication here is, well, first of all, that it's damaging.
Right. Now, I'm not too familiar with the SEO damage. I know I've
No SEO
heard.
damage. I think it's uh, more people recognize that it's a stock photo, so they go,
Right.
oh, you know.
Yeah, but there is something I believe that Google updated that if you do have images that are stock images, they weight them as sort of a lower quality or something like that. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But as far as the perception, so we're talking about audience perception. We're talking about how does that perception, how is that affected? So some users won't care. They'll see a pretty image and it won't really matter to them. But the more savvy the user, the younger the user, actually, younger users tend to stray away from stock photography because it's too mechanical. It's not organic. It's not relational because you know they can tell you just bought that somewhere and you just threw it up there. So today's users are trending more towards authentic photos that you know either you've taken yourself or that look like they've had some love put into them. So yeah, you know the damage can be weighted, and again it's demographic based. But if you can, certainly use images that seem less stock, less machined, or just kind of lean towards a little more authentic or real, because stock photos, let's face it, they just look fake. They just look, you know, they have this look of just being plastic.
Right. So, interestingly enough, by the way, I use a fair number of stock photos, but we almost always end up modifying them in some fashion, you know, to fit what our purpose is. Um, and we've worked pretty hard to have relationships, by the way, where we are actually allowed attribution-free use. But that was a very specific legal negotiation which we went through and actually ended up paying for
Yeah.
to get.
Yeah, and that's great. I think what people really want to see is that you spent some time on it, that there's intentionality behind it. I mean, any idiot can buy a stock photo and throw it up. But you know, it takes time, it takes care, it takes love, intentionality, it takes intelligence, creativity, it takes all these things to craft an image that conveys the message that you want. And people notice that, whether consciously or unconsciously. They notice the difference between a crafted image and a purchased stock image that you spent no time on.
Right. Well, it took me 60 seconds to find it in the stock photo site. It was exhausting, Dustin. I didn't have time after that to put any more effort into the image.
I know exactly what you mean. It's such a pain.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump backwards topic-wise a little bit because I missed this before. Question from Ronaldo Miguel. What's considered a good file size after compressing? So how small do we want to make that photo or that image?
Well, the file size will always be directly related to how big the image is, so what the dimensions of the image are. But you know, I'm the wrong person to ask about that because I go quality first, file size later. You know, I've made some adjustments from my website backend to make sure that no matter what the size of the image, they're delivered quickly. But I would say shoot for less than 100 KB for all images. I use big images, so I use usually my images are at least 1,000 pixels wide, you know, 800 to 1,000 pixels wide, and they're usually landscape, so they're wider than they are tall. So for me, I usually shoot for 100 KB or less, but you know, if you have smaller images, it shouldn't really be an issue.
So what about the issue of you know, the normal file size, or sorry, screen width that people browse with today? And we'll get to mobile in a second. That question is here too, and I want to we'll talk about mobile in a second. But let's just assume on a notebook or desktop type computer, I still see that people aren't necessarily ready for 1,000-pixel wide images without having to scroll. They might have, particularly if you're putting it in a blog post and there's a right rail over here. I know on the Stone Temple blog, it kind of needs to be 700 pixels or less to fit in the real estate that's available. What are your thoughts about all that, since you're the big image guy?
Well, I mean, again, you have to consider your context. Context is king, and for me, my blog is a full width. I don't have a sidebar anymore, so the 1,000-pixel wide images do work pretty well for me, and it's mobile responsive, so depending on your screen size, it'll adjust. But I mean, I would just look at where you're putting the photo. I tend to lean towards edge to edge. So if it's in a blog post, whatever your blog column width is, I would say try to get it as big as possible, because the bigger the visual, the more it's going to grab the attention, the more engaging it's going to be, the more emotion you're going to pull out, the more excitement you're going to draw out of the reader. So look at your context. If your blog is 600 pixels wide, then create 600 pixel wide images. They'll be fully optimized for the largest possible scenario, and there's no need to make a 1,000 pixel wide image if your container is only going to be 600 pixels wide. You're just you're using a bigger file size than you need. So just look at wherever you're going to implement that photo and make it the biggest size that would fit there and optimize it that way.
Yeah, fair enough. Now we have a question from Carmen Rojas. Do we know yet how the new Panda updates are treating images, how to post with lots of images rank compared to those with fewer or none? Conversion is still king, but I still wonder. So I'll take that one. I don't think that Panda is really going to care that much about the image use. The bigger question is, depending on the site, if the image is the only thing on there, and you have a lot of pages like that, unless Google figures out that it's a photo sharing site or something like that, it might decide that you have thin content if it doesn't recognize those images as having valuable content themselves. My suspicion is that Google does try to recognize such scenarios using user engagement signals. So it's actually a complex question that you're asking, Carmen. And by the way, Carmen and I are doing a show later today on Panda at 5 Eastern time. Carmen, you can go ahead and post the URL for that event invite here in this event if you like. So we'll do 30 minutes on what's going on with Panda at 5 Eastern time today. But I think for the most part, Google's Panda algorithm is somewhat agnostic to images, and it's kind of a bit of a separate thing. So that's my take on that one. Okay, so Ronaldo Miguel again, looks like the trend on web is favoring larger full-res images. Doesn't this make for a poor mobile experience?
I don't know how it would. I guess if your website is not optimized for mobile, maybe. But in most cases, most smartphones that I know of, most mobile devices, handle web pages just fine, whether they're mobile optimized or not. I guess it would depend on your bandwidth, current bandwidth, or the limitations of your phone's software to process images. But for the most part, no. I think it enhances the mobile experience.
Yeah, I think the concern might be if the images weren't resizing, then that could cause a problem. Or the file size might cause a problem, because if
Sure.
you're currently on a 3G connection, it would be a little bit painful to download a page with 200 or 300 kbyte image files along with the rest of it. It can go quite slowly, but other than that, I think you're in pretty good shape with it.
Yeah, as long as you're optimizing them from the beginning, I mean, they should be fine. If you're shooting for under 100 kilobytes, then whether it's mobile or desktop, it's going to load relatively quickly, unless you're on Edge, an Edge network on your phone, and otherwise 3G, 4G, LTE, all those technologies will process images really quickly. But again, on provider, your bandwidth at the time.
Yeah, well, both your site and the Stone Temple site are responsive, so that gives us, that stuff basically just resizes, and it becomes a matter of if you go through a process where the image quality breaks down during the resizing process. But
right.
That's really, I think, the only thing to be worried about there. And if you have instead of having a responsive site, you have a mobile site and a regular desktop site, then you kind of have to bake some of that resizing in up front. Isn't that how that works?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of responsive. I encourage all my clients, whenever I do a web design project, I refuse to not do a responsive site, because having a separate mobile site, it does create a whole lot more work. It creates a lot of issues on the processing end and the design end and the development end. So if at all possible, always try to create your websites and your blogs to be responsive based.
Yeah. We didn't make the conversion until early this year. I think it was in January, but I was so happy to get it done. And by the way, Dustin, you'll be happy to know that the Stone Temple site is getting a dramatic facelift, which will be live before too long. So
awesome.
A much more visual experience. Right now, it looks so 2000. It's a little depressing. So we're gonna get into the 2014 range with this new site design. So
cool. Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Yes, indeed. The design is actually done. It's in implementation right now, so that would be pretty cool. So I got a question here from Denver Prophet Jr. I'm going to throw up. For e-commerce images, would you agree that a category page should have uniform dimensions to create less chaos psychologically?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of what I teach people when it comes to branding can apply directly to e-commerce, sales pages, and anything. Branding is all about consistency, and user experience is about creating familiarity, comfort, and when things are consistent, when images are consistent, when there's that sort of uniformity, then people feel more comfortable, because people are more comfortable with what they know, what they understand. And if you're mixing it up too much, then it creates this, you said the perfect word, this sense of chaos, instability, unbalance. All those are negative things psychologically, especially when you're looking for a conversion of some kind. So safest bet, stick to uniformity, consistency, and you'll be better off.
Yeah, I know. It's funny you mentioned this, OCD-like trait. I know one that I have is like when I walk through my bedroom, there's this little hallway with like 4 closet doors, and whenever I go by them, I always close them all so the lines look even, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think it's kind of like that on the e-commerce page. If you have one image that's that wide and the next one's that wide, and then here and then back here, it's like, right. Ew, it just doesn't. It's jarring.
Right. Yeah, it causes the brain to do more processing, and it's more tax on the brain. So we're having to adjust our eyes and process different sizes, whereas if it was just a straight flow of information, much easier to process, much more comfortable, gives a much better experience.
Yes, indeed. So another question, Scott Scowcraft from back a ways in the Hangout, but he's asking if it's important for posts. Why not for emails too?
You'll find different opinions on this. I tend to think that images are just as important in emails. Well, I mean, I guess depends on what kind of email, right? Because we send casual communication emails all day long, every day. But if it's for the purpose of a newsletter, an email newsletter, or something of that nature, where it's a professional communications, I always include images. Just because, I mean, it's the same thing. It's communication. It's helping the person understand your communication. If it's, if you're sending someone an email, say, hey, confirming Sunday's meeting. You don't need to create a graphic to confirm Sunday's meeting. So it really just depends on, again, your objective. What are you trying to accomplish with the email? Is it a newsletter, or is it a simple communication?
You could show an image of a handshake confirming.
You could, yeah, you absolutely could. But let's be honest, ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, well, okay, fair enough. So we're getting close to the end. I wanted to get one other question in here, which because I think it brings up a different kind of point, which is it's memes, and having a very interesting meme image, and because it's kind of a different kind of use of images, if you will, because we've talked a lot about images in general ways, and I think the tendency is to react to that, as I might, that we've been talking only about purely functional images, but I do think there's a function for images that might bring out the lighter side, or a meme kind of does that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's awesome when businesses, brands, individuals who are normally, a lot of us are marketers. A lot of us, whether we know it or not, if we have a product to sell, if we have a message to communicate, then we're marketers. And when you mix up marketing with entertainment, you're going to win all day long, because people don't want to see another. They don't want to see another infomercial. They don't want to see another, billboard in their face. They want to be entertained. So entertain people. Memes are extremely fun, and if you can find a way to relate them to what you're doing, all the better. And you don't want to be associated with completely random memes and just be sharing funny GIFs all day that have nothing to do with your brand, because people see through that. You're going to get a lot of shallow followers who, when you finally do have something to sell, or something that has a conversion value attached to it, nobody's going to respond, because all people see you as is funny. So you want to have a mix of entertainment value in there, but you don't want to make that what you're all about. You want to tie it into what your overall goal is, what your overall brand is about. And I think Stone Temple does a great job of that, actually. I look forward to your Catterday posts all the time.
Yes, we're very excited about the STC cats. They do a great job for us, and Mark and I are still trying to learn from them, but we have so much to learn. Maybe the thing is that we should be taking catnip, and we have no idea that it's actually an intelligence drug. But
and the other thing about memes too is that they're shareable. If you're looking to get your message amplified by people, memes are a great way to get your message amplified, because when I need to write a blog post about this, but the psychology behind why people share things is very, very simple. You have to look at their motivations. When someone sees your post, they're going to ask themselves, do I want to share this? And the reason I'm going to share it is it either makes me look funny, I look funny for sharing it, I look smart for sharing it, or it's going to make me look cutting edge or helpful. So when you share funny, entertaining, helpful things, people are more likely to share them because it associates them with those things. So
Right.
funny memes are a good way to do that.
Well, I think you can, learn from Madison Avenue here, right? If you watch TV, I mean, over several decades, we've seen this evolution where the commercials are competing to be more entertaining than the TV show, right? Um, and so they've learned this lesson really well because you're more likely to stay there and watch it if it's entertaining. But it's more than that. You're more likely to retain the message they're delivering
Right.
when it's entertaining. So it's very powerful stuff.
Absolutely.
So we're actually at the end of the hour.
Time
And
flies.
it did fly. It was awesome. So, did you have any last comments you wanted to add, Dustin, before we call it a wrap?
Just try. Just try it. If you're intimidated by images, you're not creative, which is a lie. If you don't feel like you're good at it, just start. Just do it. You'll get better. Just resolve that if you are not good at it, you're going to be not good at it until you keep doing it. I was terrible at the beginning. I was in the realm of graphic design, but my early designs were garbage. But I had to get through that garbage to refine it. And think of your visual content marketing as always being refined, and you have to start somewhere. So just go out there and start.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You have to engage and learn, and hopefully, if you need it, get help from an expert to help you learn faster if you can afford to do that. Great way to go. So just a couple very brief announcements. Again, at 5 o'clock today, I'll be on a Panda-specific show, just talking about Panda 4.0 with Carmen Rojas. She shared the links in the event invite. On Thursday at 3 Eastern Time, Peg Fitzpatrick, Rebecca Radice, and I are going to do a show focused on Pinterest and Google+. Two peas in a pod, we're calling them. So that's that. Next week, we will have Mark Traphagen back, and because it's first Tuesday, we'll actually have David Amerlin. But thank you so much for filling in today. Dustin, didn't feel like you were filling in at all. It was great to have you as my co-host on a show.
My pleasure. Fun to actually be able to join one of these.
Yes, indeed. And hopefully we'll get to do it again soon. Of course, we're together on the social media hangout most Sundays. But thanks, everybody. That's it for the Digital Marketing Answers show for today. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.